It was
All right, we're
great.
live,
I was
gentlemen.
in California and then Seattle.
Whereabouts in California?
We started out in San Diego and then we went out to Joshua Tree to the desert. So it's kind of
Nice.
cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Claims to be libertarian, goes to vacation in Seattle and California. Okay.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Well, it's nice to live. It's nice to visit there. It's just not
Nice
so
to
nice
visit.
to live there and pay their taxes.
Well, we're just waiting on Pisco right now, and then the viewers will start trickling in here. So
That's right.
Yeah, big day today. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I'm
You mean
shocked.
Liberation Day?
Big
D-Day.
liberation day here in these United States.
Right.
Fucking great to be an American.
I feel very liberated, personally.
I feel like it's
I feel very liberated from affordable groceries.
it's just
Look,
incredibly
From Canadian maple
But
syrup.
Brett, you guys are discounting the fact that there are clear national security reasons for all of these tariffs, okay? And that is why they're legally able to be signed, okay? When I see cheap lumber getting imported from Canada, I've never felt less safe, okay? But I feel much more safe now that we have all of these tariffs coming online. And I don't know about you guys, but I feel like most Americans agree with me, all right?
this is one of those
Yeah.
times where, libs and libertarians, there's some overlap. There was a joint press conference between
Well, the nice thing is that maybe you guys have always been like this, but Democrats did not always support free trade. And Trump kind of reverse polarized the Democratic Party into becoming a free trade party. And I mean, that's positive development in my view. But I mean, historically, it was like the Bernie Sanders wing who were the anti-free traders and the Republicans were the free traders.
Well, I mean,
you
we
know-
had like the mainstream of the Democrats, and Pisco's joining us now. I mean, we had Clinton signed NAFTA, very free trade guy. Obama tried to do TPP. And you're right. Like when Bernie started coming online with Trump as well, it's sort of two ends of the anti-free trade coin started to become a lot more popular. But now that we have Pisco, we can officially start. Pisco, is your mic working? Let's see.
Oh, it sure is, Econoboy. I'm
It's
confident
working.
of that.
He's
How we
confident
doing?
now.
How we doing, folks?
Great.
Right
Good,
off of
man.
his Tim
Good.
Pool guest appearance.
Yes. I'm told it was the best appearance that anyone has ever had on any show.
People are saying.
How was that? I saw some
Oh, it
clips,
was fun.
but I can't subject myself to experience anymore.
we now
well,
have two alumni of
I get
Tim Pool's
flashbacks.
podcasts on here.
Did you go on there?
I did, yeah. And he freaked out on me and said I was evil for supporting free trade.
That was it. That was a famous clip. Yeah, I thought that was a little bit unhinged of Tim. Luckily for me, he was like a very jovial and like debonair guy when I was there, and everyone was super nice. And he didn't really have as big of a freak out during when I was there.
Caught him on a
But
good day.
Yeah, it must have been a good day, I guess.
You know
Well,
what
I
it
think
is though?
in your
Well, I was just gonna say, like, I feel like Tim Pool is like a bit of an intellectual lightweight, and when he's around someone who is making like really good arguments, I feel like there's a part of him that recognizes that. With people like
Not like Brad, right? Who's making terrible arguments.
well, for some reason he went no. I mean, I thought Brad was making really good arguments too, but for some reason he went scorched earth on you. I don't know if it's just because of the topic or whatever, but he was accusing you of supporting like slave labor and such.
Yeah,
Well,
that was
guys,
it.
the intellectual heavyweight tweeted about an hour ago, just ban all imports.
really
Yeah,
quick,
no,
before we get too deep into the topic, now that everyone's here, we kind of got some people in. To the audience, Josiah will not be here tonight. He had a double booking, so he will not be here. You're left with the four of us, and
We're better off.
while we have, true, exactly. We always love to sub Josiah out, especially for Brad here. Brad, now that people have trickled in, introduce yourself. Who are you? Where do you come from? And why are you here, Brad? Why are you even here?
Absolutely. I'm a center-right journalist, YouTuber, content creator, kind of from a more libertarian political tradition. Why am I here? Honestly, I always want to talk to more people who are left of center. Don't usually get the opportunity. And Hutch shot me a DM a little while ago and asked me to. And I was like, sure, if we can make it happen, we can make it happen.
Well, you came on my radar because of that Tim Pool appearance. It just struck out to me as like particularly aggressive, and I thought you did actually a really good job of making the case for free markets. we'll probably disagree on a lot of things if you're right-wing perspective, but on that note, you were quite convincing in your argument. So yeah, I wanted to have you on.
I'd like to think so, but I was just more struck with than anything the character of the kind of populist right-wing argument against trade, how woke it felt, right? It was all about my personal experiences, my truth, my industry, what I've seen. And then it was all about emotions and kind of demagoguery. And I mean, like, I feel like I'm back in gender studies class in college where people are like going around the circle and sharing their truth. Like, this is not how you're supposed to debate economics at the very least. But I found that to be kind of an increasing phenomenon with the populist kind of MAGA right. Their discourse feels woke. And that's why I find myself arguing with them so much these days.
Brad, can I give you some shared experience there? So I feel very similar ways with respect to the First Amendment when it comes to some of these attempted deportations of people on the basis of their protest of Israel, where you get a lot of this kind of feeling of, oh, people aren't safe on campus because these protests are happening. Listen, we obviously come from different, I don't know, political traditions or leanings, but when I was at college, I felt that a lot of this went a little overboard in terms of, yelling at people for wearing certain costumes. And so I was always kind of skeptical of that frame from a left-wing perspective, but I'm seeing it come back really vigorous, especially in the areas that you're talking about, immigration and free trade. And then now this kind of attack on the campuses, attack on the universities and the law firms on the basis of, the safety of, I guess people who support the policy in Israel.
Well, free speech, if I had to pick like 4 things I've built my career in journalism and advocacy around, free speech is one of them. And I always meant it, as in free speech, like for all the opinions. I agreed when we were saying hate speech is not a thing. Hate speech is free speech. And I still agree when that's like speech that's viewed as anti-Semitic, or when that's speech that's critical of U.S. foreign policy or what have you. And so it's been kind of an ugly couple of years because a lot of us who came up in this discourse, I was surrounded by all these right-wing free speech warriors who turned out to be very fair weather free speech allies, because as soon as they got in power, they're making memes about people being deported for their words, or they're like laughing at the idea of shutting down law firms punitively, stripping them of of the security clearances they literally need to represent clients, banning them from federal buildings because of who they represent politically. And to me, I've always just thought, like, these are principles. You have to think about them on a universal basis, like set your politics aside. A lot of people, I guess I should have known they didn't actually mean any of it, but I guess I always knew some of them were just grifting or hopping on a bandwagon or whatever. I didn't realize quite how many.
So just for context, I'm not super familiar with your history. I just saw your appearance on Tim Pool and started following you on Twitter after that. Can you just talk a little bit about like how you got into politics, how you got into content creation?
So I went to the University of Massachusetts Amherst, UMass, which is a super left-wing college. And I just went there. They actually have an openly Marxist economics department. One of the only ones in the United States that's like they call themselves Marxist. They're not Keynesian or anything like that. They're like, we're Marxists. And it's one of the most hyper woke, especially in that era of 2016, 2017. Like, we had a free speech zone. They called the police when somebody wrote "dicks out for Harambe, the gorilla" on a whiteboard because they said it was like racist to black people. And I'm like,
stop.
That seems racist.
If I Google that, is that a real story?
That you saw people making fun of a gorilla and thought of the black people. Like, that was wild.
Well, some people were using her, to be fair, and you have to grant this, Brad. Some people were using Harambe as a racist meme. So maybe they were, I don't know, funneling all. You don't believe that, Brad?
Well, I mean, I believe you. I don't recall that. I just remember people joking a lot. About Harambe the gorilla. And I know the people who did it in this case certainly weren't doing it. This was in my dorm, certainly weren't doing it as any kind of racist thing. But just anyway, so it was this super left-wing space. I was kind of repulsed by it, repulsed by the Marxism, repulsed by the hypersensitivity, by the tone policing. And I was kind of pushed to the opposite extreme. But that was at the same time that Trump was on the rise, and I really was never attracted to his brand of politics. So I found myself becoming kind of a de facto Gary Johnson voter. Anyway, after college, I got into campus advocacy. The left-wing campus atmosphere was incredibly hostile to me for very milquetoast kind of center-right opinions. I got into conservative media after I graduated, worked at a conservative magazine, and just over the years kind of drifted more towards a classically liberal or libertarian perspective, seeing up close that conservative media had its own problems. The Republican Party was, in many ways, a hot mess. I never really was like I'm a proud Republican ever, but now I'm not even sure I would call myself that, though I still vote for some Republican candidates sometimes. And then my political evolution has been, the other context you need to know is I've been very critical of the LGBT community from the perspective of a gay person, but not on board with a lot of the gender stuff. I view a lot of it as counterproductive, a lot of it as harmful in different ways. And I think it led to part of the backlash that we're seeing now in support for LGBT rights. But that was something that originally made me a target and kind of persona non grata in the gay community, especially in DC. Like I was excommunicated from a gay men's soccer club because my view that children shouldn't medically transition was deemed to make hypothetical future transgender members unsafe. Of course, that's not an opinion I brought up at soccer practice, nor were there any trans members. And also the trans people I know are not made unsafe by someone else existing with a different opinion. But regardless, that was kind of my reception there. But over time, I moved back towards the center somewhat and became more disillusioned with kind of the right wing politically. But yeah, that's the super short condensed version.
You mentioned politicians there. I'm curious. You said you do vote for some Republicans. If there was someone in Congress today that you had to identify most strongly with, would it be like a Rand Paul type, or is he too far off the deep end as far as you're concerned?
I've always liked Rand. We have a good relationship. I've worked with his office. I appreciate him standing up on things like tariffs and what have you. But no, like we're not a great fit ideologically in some ways, and he is. I mean, I understand why he does what he does. He couldn't be an elected Republican in the Senate if you didn't acquiesce to some of the things he acquiesces to and go along with. But I wouldn't really say that we're like this. There's lots of issues where I do disagree with him, but I do appreciate him I think he's actually fiscally conservative, which I appreciate. He's actually consistently anti-spending, pro-free trade, which is pretty rare for elected Republicans. Most of them don't care at all. You know, I have to tell you, I'll admit something embarrassing. When she first came a couple of years ago, there were two Republican members of Congress where I was like, these are my people. I relate to their brand of Republicanism. One of them was Peter Meyer, who represented my district here in Grand Rapids. He was run
primaried,
out.
Right?
He was primaried because he voted to certify the 2020 election.
Yeah.
And I'll throw some shade at the Democrats. The Democrats funneled money into his primary to support his election-denying Republican. And then that election-denying Republican won the primary, and then they beat obviously the Democrat beat him because this is a moderate district. So they're not going to, some ultra mega election denier who thinks women shouldn't vote, they're not going to vote for him. Democrats were so cynical. The DCCC poured hundreds of thousands of dollars at the last minute in this close race.
That's not the only race they did that for. That's not the only
race
they did that for. And it worked. It worked broadly across the country. Yeah.
You know, Brad, to be fair, I mean, it worked though. You know, like
I don't disagree that it worked, but it's like, to me, indicative that you don't actually care about democracy, rule of law. You wouldn't be trying to actively unseat the Republicans who did the right thing in 2020. It's deeply cynical and hypocritical. It worked, sure.
If you hold the view that the Democrats are going to be like the vanguard of, you know, holding up democracy, then it sort of justifies it in a loose sense, right? Like if
any ends justify the means, maybe, but.
Well, we're being very specific here. I mean, if you have a strategy of trying to elect more Democrats and you think that this strategy is going to work, and then the strategy does work across the country, it seems like you're somewhat justified in doing it.
Until you lose big time in the.
You don't care about the ethics of it at all, and just the outcome. It's deeply cynical.
Well, I care about winning, so.
But hang on a second, Hutch. When we lost in 2024, maybe the argument might be the only Republicans you have left are MAGA Republicans, in no small part due to the fact that they're being pushed by Democrats. Now, I don't know where I fall on that line. I think that, I could see the argument that the ultimate end of defeating the Republican Party might be worth it. But in these cases, there's something just feel a little off about, pushing against people who voted to certify the election, which for me is like the most important thing to determine if I'm going to vote for you is your anti-democratic moves in time and space. But I don't know. Maybe I'm
it's a very high risk, high reward strategy.
I understand the argument against it, and I sympathize. I'm not like 100% one way on one side or the other here, but
but let me tell you the other, and this is the embarrassing one. I still stand by Peter Meyer as being a good pick. Nancy Mace.
You're kidding.
Listen, though, hear me out. When she entered Congress, she was in a swing district. She branded herself as a socially moderate, fiscally conservative, younger generation Republican. And
she voted to impeach, did she not?
Sorry, what?
She voted to impeach, did she not? In one of the impeachment trials.
She did not vote to impeach, but she was very critical of Trump after January 6th, and she did vote to certify, I think. Though I'm fuzzy on the details. It's been a while. But anyway, she was moderate. She got redistricted, and they made her district more red, and she had some personal stuff that I won't get into, and she's totally lost the plot. She's become an embarrassment at this point. So that's like my worst take. I did a whole profile of her as a potential new face for a new generation of Republican, and she turned out to be Marjorie Taylor Greene, basically indistinguishable from Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Look, a lot of us like John Fetterman as well on this side of the aisle, and we took an L on him as well. So we can forgive you for liking Nancy at one point.
Well, I'm curious about John Fetterman because he genuinely seemed to have some form of cognitive impairment at one point, but then he recovered, and maybe that's how that works. I don't know. With the
is that a joke? I can't tell.
Well, no, I mean
he had
a stroke, and then during the debate, it was very obvious that it had affected him, and I'm not sure if that's the cause of this shift.
But he seems sharp now. Still, he doesn't seem out of it now.
He seems better now than he was in the debate, for sure.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Right.
The debate was like a few months after the stroke, or a few weeks.
Like he literally had the stroke like during the campaign season. It was forced to recover during that time, and it seemed like it seemed like what he was saying about his medical condition was true. That this was a recoverable thing, and it was just like a temporary kind of like struggle that he was going to go through, which is good. I mean, I take John Fetterman to be. A lot of people call him a grifter. I would not use that word to describe John Fetterman. I just find him to be like very, similar to maybe Nancy Mace. I don't know if you'd call her a grifter, but like lost the plot on some key issues that we on the left care about, you could say.
I've agreed with some of the more moderate stances he's taken, but I mean, the Israel thing is a different story. I don't know where you guys fall on that, but
I think he's always been pretty pro-Israel, but when the student protests kicked off, it's sort of created a much larger divide. I feel like that was like the starting point when the progressives started to sour on him, was when he was taking these really unapologetically, like he was going well beyond just material support for Israel. He was basically saying like they're justified in doing anything they want.
That's where people totally lose me.
Right.
He doesn't wear a suit for the president. I was going to say he doesn't wear a suit.
Sorry, what?
Go on, Brad.
I criticized Nikki Haley because she was signing her name on bombs. And I'm like, listen, I believe Israel has every right to exist. I believe they have every right to defend themselves. I don't support how far they've taken the war in Gaza. But even if you do, these bombs might kill innocent children, and you're signing your name on them. Something about that struck me as demonic. And
same with Josh Shapiro. He did the same thing.
Part of the hardcore zealotry on the Israel side, just the same way. I mean, I think if you get far enough on the pro-Palestinian side, you see very crazy stuff as well. But that's where people lose me.
Yeah. If you guys want to pivot, I mean, obviously the big news of the day is certainly the tariffs. Trump comes in and says, hey, all these other countries charge us tariffs, and we're going to institute reciprocal tariffs, half the amount of the tariffs that they charge us. And for some kind of background information for the audience, so for China, for instance, he's talking about essentially and these are like universal tariffs on all imports. He announced, in addition to those, an extra 25% tariffs on all auto imports, and we'll see like how these things actually get implemented. But he's also announced Universal tariff, 34% on Chinese goods, 20% on European Union goods, 46% on Vietnamese goods, 32% on Taiwanese goods, just like all the way down the line. This would make the U.S. have the highest average tariff rate of the entire developed world by a substantial margin. Like none of the other developed countries on the planet have nearly as high a tariffs as that would. That would mean that the U.S. would have. The markets dropped immediately on relation to this news. If you go to the betting markets, they're saying more likely than not a recession now within the year. The betting markets have kind of like peaked at that so far, highest probability of a recession since Trump took office. And the latest GDP Now forecast from the Fed has a constriction during the first quarter of about 1.4% if you adjust for the gold imports, which people were talking about as a thing. And to put that in perspective, the depth of the recession in 2009 was about 3.2%. So we're looking at what appears to be more likely than not, at the very least, some type of recession in the near future if Trump actually officially does start to collect all of these duties at the border. So that's some background info, guys. What do you guys think about all that?
Why don't you start, Brad? I got my thoughts.
Sure. I mean, I think it's disastrous. I think it's going to age terribly. I've always been not with Trump on tariffs. I'm a Milton Friedman when it comes to economics. So he's always lost me. But what's really strange is Trump, in my view, had a strong economic record in his first presidential term before COVID. Set if you stop in 2019, and then that's a whole nother can of worms. And he did that through actually pretty traditional free market, supply side economics, tax cuts, deregulation, and then very like limited tariffs on China and on specific things. He didn't do this broad-based trade war, and it's not going to have the same effect. You do fundamentally different things, you're not going to have the same effect. I'm actually sympathetic to the Republican concern about dependence on China, but to me it's insane to be tariffing Vietnam, South Korea, India, all these countries we should be trading more with to become less dependent on China. We're tariffing them too. And then we're starting trade wars with freaking Canada and Mexico. So I think the whole thing's a mistake. I also think it's a betrayal of the voters who very specifically voted, and whether you blame Biden for it or not, it happened under his watch, high cost of living, high prices, high inflation. Now we're going to go and start a massive trade war that's going to make almost everything we rely on more expensive. I don't understand it at all.
Brad, could you do me a favor and pull the mic just a little bit closer? You're a little soft on the. There you go.
There we go. Well, we wouldn't be live and learn if we didn't just have to stress to our audience in the strongest possible terms that we believe the causality that Brad just laid out in terms of Trump's economic, situation during his first term, and that Biden's, the inflation, all that stuff is causally related to some of these policies. But in terms of the tariffs, I think that there's large agreement on our, and I think that for sure it must be a slap in the face if they recognize it, and maybe you have a better insight, Brad, since you're in these circles, if you think this will move the needle on either ideological conservatives or their base, these will have disastrous effects on the people who voted for Trump, presumably because of the prices under Joe Biden.
I think if the prices actually in the front of their eyes just start to go up and it hammers them, the reality hard enough, people might revolt. But a lot of them, I live here in Michigan, a lot of my in-laws are normal Republicans. They're not super political people, but they voted for Trump. They seem to tell themselves different things that you hear from Trump. One, it's just posturing, it's just negotiating, or it's just reciprocal. He's actually trying to get tariffs down, but also tariffs. They seem to simultaneously hold the belief that tariffs help the economy, protect workers, and made America rich. And we're actually trying to get less tariffs by having more tariffs. And there's obvious cognitive.
How do you solve that, there. Brad? How do you solve it? It seems like the craziest thing in the world that every 2 seconds, those memes are correct, where it's like the tariffs are off, art of the deal, tariffs are on, all the economic benefits that you're talking about. How do you reason with that?
When it hits them in the pocketbook, people will realize. When the cars they drive, when the eggs they buy, the milk, everything they start on a daily basis. This is what happened under Biden, and we don't have to get into the sidetrack of is Biden to blame for it, right?
Right.
Debate. I think a little bit is the answer I would say, but set that aside. people notice their things they rely on getting more expensive, and they blame the people.
And there
in
was
power.
a revolt, and that you're correct. Yep.
If it happens again, people will adjust.
Well, if it,
Well, I was going to say, Hutch, especially when Trump, he didn't set himself up for success with regard to this narrative either, right? Like at the same time that Republicans ran their entire campaign on like, we're going to make things cheaper, we're going to make inflation go down, we're going to have, you know, to some extent he was messaging towards deflation, right? Like we're going to reverse things the other way. Right, exactly, Brad, which is never going to happen. That's a total red herring. Now, to be fair, maybe we'll have some deflation on account of a recession that'll happen under all these tariffs, but then you have that sort of catch-22, that rock and a hard place where if you cause a recession from raising tariffs, things are both more expensive and output is shrinking.
It's the monkey paw.
right, exactly. So I mean, it's terrible economic planning from the Trump administration. It's a really bad political move, and to be fair for the Trump supporters watching this, the very few of you, it's bizarre because it's bizarre because if you think about it, right, like if Trump really thought that these tariffs were just a slam dunk, totally good economic policy, China pays the tariff, why has he been delaying them over and over and over again? Why wasn't this just a day one policy? Like, hey, press the button that does the good thing, right? Like, it makes no sense why Trump wouldn't do that. Either he's getting advice from people saying, and he's listening to them, hey, dumbass, this will be really fucking bad for the economy if you do this, and he's listening to them, or he's cowardly, he's not actually good at making deals. Like, you're stuck between those two scenarios. If you're a Trump supporter, you just can't explain the delays.
There are two types of people inside the Trump administration. There are actual populists who believe this stuff works, like Stephen Miller, Peter Navarro, these types.
The delusional.
Then there are people with Trump's ears, the Scott Bessents, the Steve Moores, who know that this is bad and do tell him behind the scenes. They defend it publicly often because they have decided to do that to themselves for whatever reason. I think that might explain some of what you're saying. There's an internal conflict over some of these issues.
Well, it's a really sharp turnaround because it's, as salient as immigration and Biden's mental acuity was during the 2024 election, by far the biggest motivating factor for voters on both sides of the aisle was the economy. And Trump ran on this promise of not only reducing people's cost greatly, but doing it immediately. He would talk about drill, baby, drill. He was going to have your energy bill in the first month just by drilling more oil. And he was going to, drilling more oil was going to bring down the cost of your groceries and all these other goods and services. And now, less than 3 months later, he's telling his voters, it's your patriotic duty to pay higher costs for a little bit, with the long-term payoff being, a boon to domestic manufacturing, which his first term, it's estimated that they lost between 145,000 and 250,000 jobs because of those tariffs. And the tariffs that he's doing now are going to...
The Trade Association for Manufacturers put out a statement today expressing concern that their costs are all about to go up.
Right.
I would hope so.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and this is... this is completely reasonable to expect, right? It's not like manufacturers only buy American, right? This is something that these things are very complex. I mean, in part, the automakers were trying to tell Trump, hey, can you at least exempt like our specific company or something? Because
which he did really for a month, technically, yeah.
Right, because there's just a lot of parts that cross the border multiple times, and it's like, fuck, you might be multiplying my cost of individual parts by like several times more than the actual headline rate of the tariff because of how many times it's crossing the border and getting, essentially you get value added across both sides of the border and it gets taxed each time. And so it's really bad. And I think as well, like Pisco was mentioning and Hutch was mentioning, you combine that with another bad economic policy, which is we want to deport all these people, right? Like that's another thing that raises costs for consumers, that makes things a lot more expensive. And it doesn't exactly help your labor market as much as Republicans would think. Like I think the Republican idea is like, at most charitably, the Republican idea is these are short-term things that have long-term economic benefits. But, really anybody who's in the know understands that that you have diminished growth long-term. Like that's your best bet from this. It's just, we're just a little bit poorer than we otherwise would be. And if in the case of a Democrat not getting into office and changing all of these things immediately, we might be a lot poorer than we probably otherwise would be. The story of a lot of countries is a story of how they open up and become a more globally facing rather than more entrenched within their own kind of autarkic economic system.
I was
Will
going to say,
Democrats undo it? Because Biden left in place a lot of Trump's tariffs.
these ones are too crazy. Not the same thing.
These ones are too crazy.
No, I agree. This is much worse. But Biden ended up collecting for some of the tariffs more revenue than Trump under his first term tariff.
I think that's fair, but that seems to be in line with one vision that you provided at the start of your thing there, which was that you did think that some of the China tariffs made sense, and that you did think that
I actually not necessarily. I just think I'm a pretty diehard free trader. I'm just saying they're much more defensible, the China tariffs, and they're much.
But
less
you are
defensible.
In favor of a pivot from China, even if tariffs aren't the way to do that. Is that what you're suggesting at the start?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
I think especially if what we're saying is true, especially it's not just that the tariffs are like bad in some opportunity cost sense. Like this is probably going to cause a recession if these actually go through, right? Like the tariffs themselves will be unpopular to the extent that I wouldn't be surprised if Trump himself 180s and just gets rid of them after 6 months or something like that.
I want to do something remarkable though. I want to do something remarkable, kind of boy. I want to try to read Hutch's mind right now, and Hutch, you can tell me if I'm wrong, and I want to get Brad's response to this. I think that what Hutch is thinking right now is it's going to hurt the American economy, good, or part of it, good. These people who voted for Trump deserve to feel the cost of what they went through and the actual fiscal cost in their pockets of what his policies mean. And until they face their just desserts, until they face some kind of cost, they're never going to learn. Am I wrong?
Definitely not. But
Okay.
I am at the place where, so like, I guess I feel kind of pessimistic at this point in the sense that I think that it might be true that people may have to actually experience the pain of this presidency to understand that he's not a great president. I'm not rooting for it to happen, but in terms of like Trump voters actually experiencing voters remorse on the order of, I don't know, 10 to 20% of his voters or whatever, maybe it might be the case that they'll have to experience their paychecks not going as far. But I'm not rooting for it to happen. We're all going to be impacted by it.
I agree with that. I was just trying to see if you were on the level.
Yeah, I honestly never want people to suffer, whether I agree with them or not. That's an instinct that you can find on the left or the right, like wanting the other side to suffer. It's their time to suffer. I basically never feel like that. And when I do, I try to restrain my inner, because you can get a little bit of what's the right word, like schadenfreude or whatever, when you see, for example, somebody who pushed cancel culture get canceled. It's very easy to join in on the cancel culture mob, but I've been against that, so I don't. I don't want to see people suffer anyway. I mean, so I think it's good that even if you think Trump voters might need this reminder, I do think it's sad the people who like dance on their graves of their, when Trump, for example, I keep seeing these videos of these very dumb Trump voters who were married to or in a relationship with an illegal immigrant.
Oh yeah,
who then got deported.
Many such cases,
and they were like,
I didn't think
I didn't think he would take my boyfriend. I still don't want to see them suffer, but that is like an extreme example where it's like, what did he literally said? I'll deport them all.
Right, yeah.
He wasn't shy about it.
And he said he would do these tariffs for that matter. I want to rewind a little bit to what Econoboy was talking about speculating if he's going to back off. I do think eventually he will be forced to back off, but I do think he's kind of locked us into like, I'm going to say 6 months minimum. Because if he backs off after a month or 2 months, that's just him saying this is a failed policy. I did something stupid. It didn't reap any rewards, and he can't blame anybody else. And so I feel like we're going to be kind of locked on this path for at least 6 to 9 months, maybe even a year.
Unless he can find an out. If he can find a way to declare victory, like, for example, I saw the Ontario PM say, we'll cut our tariffs if the U.S. will cut theirs. If he can find some kind of path where he can frame a 180 as a I won, maybe he'll take it.
Oh, he'll definitely try to frame it that way when he does eventually pull back, but he genuinely seems to think that tariffs are good policy. So like I don't know where he got that idea, but he seriously seems to believe in them.
I think as well, like one of the problems that you'll find in a lot of different countries is that the type of tariffs where they're willing to back off on are not the ones that like Trump in theory would think of as like most important. Like he talks about like the Canadian agricultural tariffs. Canada, especially from the posture that they've adopted on account of their new PM taking office, they understand, same thing with Scheinbaum in Mexico, that look, America obviously could really hurt our economies, but that's also kind of a political winner for us. Like, ironically, it's almost like a worsening economy for us is better for our political situation, because being tough on Trump is popular in so many of these countries, right? A lot of Europeans, a lot of Canadians, a lot of Mexicans, Chinese government obviously as well. Like, these are the biggest trading partners, and they also have every motivation to not give an inch to Trump, because their voters do not want to see their governments acquiescing to what they feel like is a radical American government. And certainly I feel that way as well. But these are also Canadians and Europeans that are kind of like, from the Overton window, positioned much, kind of shifted to the left to Americans. They do not like Trump.
Pierre Poilievre was like pretty close in the polls, and then all this Canada's the 51st state talk happened. And
it's wild.
It's so funny. Trump single-handedly accomplished nothing. We're not going to take Canada's 51st state, why would he even want that? We'll have so many more Democrats I could go off a rant about that, and all he did was sabotage Pierre's chance of becoming the prime minister, and
completely the odds. If you go to the odds, they're like completely flipped. Where before it was virtually assured that the Conservatives would win a majority government, and now it looks like Mark Carney is what I looked at Polymarket, like 80% likely to win a majority or at least minority government.
He's looking pretty good.
Wild.
Same with Zelensky. He boosted Zelensky's approval ratings by like 10 to 15 points immediately after that Oval Office situation.
From like a filthy libs perspective, obviously as well, Pierre Poilievre versus Carney, not close. Like, Carney's a way better option than Pierre Poilievre. Pierre Poilievre was kind of he was
I think it's
kind
Polyev,
of like
right?
Polyev, I don't know, some weird French Canadian name. All right, listen, I'm American. No, but he was positioned himself to be like kind of a more conservative, more like right wing Canadian prime minister. And whereas you've got Carney in office, who, a very kind of more like economically centrist liberal who was the head of two different central banks. I mean, this is a guy who's not exactly like socialist in his orientation, but he's, I think from most policy angles, he's a much better option for Canadians than Pierre Poilievre or Poilievre, or however you pronounce it, which is good for the Canadian people.
Sorry. Yeah. Can we get a little wonky for it? Because you guys are more specifically Conboy and Brad. You guys are more like in tune with like economic stuff. Can you talk about like, what does this mean for China? What does this mean for Russia? What does this mean for other countries that are hoping to swoop in and usurp the United States' role as like a global hegemon? Like, how do they prepare for this, or how do they respond to this?
Well, the one thing I will say is there are some ways in which this could be good for China. I saw China, and I haven't read it fully yet, but I saw a report about like China talking to Japan about coming to agreements on trade and lowering their barriers. And I'm like, when you can get China and Japan to agree,
Korea.
And Korea. Yeah.
Wait, Brad, have you seen those memes where they're like, it's Xi Jinping, it's like do nothing, win anyway?
Right, yeah. The super alpha Chad, Xi Jinping.
I mean,
it's crazy. It seems like it benefits China in every way.
I keep seeing Republicans say we don't need any friends. And I just find that like a really bizarre sentiment. Obviously, the US is in many ways the most powerful country in the world, but having friends and allies is actually still good, especially if you really, like many of these MAGA Republicans do, view China and Russia as, or particularly China, as serious existential threats. Why would you also be trying to like start unnecessary feuds and beef with your allies and friends?
All right, here's the conspiratorial angle. Oh, sorry, go ahead. You first, Econoboy.
I was going to say, I mean, this is one of the ways that Obama, I think, accurately portrayed the TPP, was as a way to counteract Chinese influence in the same region, right? That, like, these other governments are not stupid to the economic potential of these developing countries. China, the whole point of the Belt and Road Initiative that China engaged in was to try and build out infrastructure in other countries to create export markets for themselves. It's like, hey, we've got the goodwill from investing in their infrastructure, but now we also have the actual infrastructure and more like middle income people, because we help them develop, that can actually buy a lot of our exports, instead of only basically more adversarial nations like the EU and the UK and America and places like that. a very kind of like smart long-term trade strategy, this void gets filled by someone, right? And that's kind of the question for American policymakers is, are we comfortable with China taking a much more active kind of proportional power in the open trade market that we see today? Certainly as an American, I am not, because they have an autocratic form of government that I don't want to see exported elsewhere. And to the extent that you can criticize American democracy, you can criticize by tenfold Chinese democracy. And so I certainly wouldn't want that to be.
And at the same time,
you mentioned the TPP there. It's funny because on this list that Trump released of the tariff rates that countries charge us, a lot of those numbers are wrong. But even to the extent he's accurately complaining about high tariffs being charged on us by some of these countries, many of them are TPP members. And if we'd been in that, they would
not have. Yeah,
it would be like zero or much lower or whatever. And the irony is rich. Same with Canada. He negotiated our current trade framework with Canada and Mexico. So
it's pretty remarkable. And then on top of that, we're surrendering all this soft power at the same time. So it seems like a really bad combination of things to happen if you're worried about China coming in and just gobbling up all that influence.
I was going to ask you, Brad, because it kind of, to the soft power point, dovetails with some kind of on the fiscal side radical shakeups here. I'm thinking specifically about DOGE, and with respect to soft power, I'm thinking about foreign aid and USAID. And so, what's your view on what Hutch just said about soft power, and how does that dovetail with with USAID, foreign aid, and maybe just our fiscal spending in general? Do you support DOGE?
Well, that is a very complicated question for me because I support a lot of the goals of DOGE. I'm a fiscal conservative. I would absolutely slash government spending. I would shut down, for example, the Department of Education. But there are, if you care about principles, there's also a proper way for things to be done. And I do not believe that the executive branch can shut down agencies without Congress that Congress has appropriated funding for. So, for example, while I would like to close the Department of Education, I don't believe in doing it via executive order. I think you need to pass a bill through Congress to take what I would call the 10 or 15% of what it does that's important, move that to other places, close the doors, zero out the funding. And that's how I feel about a lot of the DOGE stuff. With USAID, for example, it just seems like they moved incredibly quickly, broke a ton of things, and people potentially even died. I would have ordered a review of it because I believe there's tons of waste, I'm sure. But the problem is they're also I get very frustrated with this because my background is as a journalist. Elon Musk just either lies or carelessly posts untrue things constantly. And it drives me insane. DOGE puts numbers and it's like 10 billion versus, it was 10 million. And I'm like, you're only off by a factor of 1,000. It's like the sloppiness with the receipts and the process here really bothers me. With something like USAID, I stay out of the foreign policy lane a lot, so I won't get into the soft power of it all, but I'll say that what they should have done is a thorough review of every grant and every program and then decided what to cut. Not just suddenly come and pulled the rug out from all these people in these foreign countries, taking care of people like you hear these horror stories about people who had their medicine taken away, doctors who had their funding cut off, people who died, all this stuff. This is why they're just moving in a way that breaks things with all of it. And I just don't. I actually worry as a fiscal conservative that they may well stain the reputation of fiscal conservatism
with the backlash,
chaos, while actually achieving basically no meaningful reduction in government spending. Because they're cutting is it's a rounding error on the entitlements and the defense spending and everything else. So,
well, there's some relevant news today. There was Politico reporting out of Politico that Elon is going to step back from his DOGE position. Now they're running with the spin of this was always the plan, but I tried to look back. I could not find any examples of them saying that their intention this entire time was for Elon to step back this soon. They talked about it a few days ago last week, but it does seem like this administration is paying a political price. I mean, if you look at the results, even out of Florida last night, but like out of Wisconsin, does seem to be a pretty thorough repudiation of Elon Musk. He's not popular. A lot of Republicans like yourself, Brad, have concerns with the pace at which he's moving and the potential carelessness in the execution of Doge's goals. What do you think, Econo Boy Pisco?
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly was not the plan to for Elon Musk to be signaling his way out of things. And to be fair, we don't really know how that would go, or necessarily even what the motivations would be. Like, I think that I could buy, not that it was the plan that Elon would step out, but I could buy the idea that Elon did not really realize how negatively he would be received by the American people, and
I think that's
he might
apparent.
just right, and he might just not. He might he's a fucking billionaire. He might just not want to do this anymore, right? Like, I could buy that explanation much more than I could buy the explanation of oh, this was always the plan. But truthfully, yeah, I think there's definitely pressure from within the administration, from the mid-level up, where you've seen reporting of cabinet level members saying look, I'm kind of sick of dealing with DOGE and their bullshit, and so we might see
Shouting
DOGE
matches
kind
with
of-
Rubio.
yeah, we might see DOGE just kind of wither away, because I mean, without Musk, I mean, it's his whole initiative, right? So
Well,
DOGE
there
probably
had
stays
already
away.
been reporting over the last couple months that Susie Wiles and Elon were having a ton of conflict because he was just wilding out on social media. You'd have Donald Trump get up in front of a podium and be like, we're not going to cut Social Security, we're not going to cut Medicaid, and then Elon's going on a podcast talking about how there's $1 trillion of waste in Social Security. He undermined him on the AI initiative. He's, got ahead of things when it comes to Ukraine. He's just been kind of a nightmare that Donald Trump has been more or less forced to tolerate just because of how much money he puts into these Republican campaigns. And so I think Donald Trump probably didn't like him from the start and just sort of made a devil's bargain because that's a lot of money and you don't want to pass up on that.
And it'll be interesting to see how and if that money continues to flow, right? Because if it is more of a push factor, like Elon getting pushed out, this guy's a billionaire. He's maniacal, right? Like, he's a very egotistical guy. This is a guy who had no experience in government, thought he could come in and actually do government work, and he's clearly very bad at it because, it turns out you might need at least a shadow of some direct experience to be good at it, ideally speaking. And so, if he's getting pushed out, I wouldn't be surprised if Elon Musk, turns that money tap off. Especially, we just saw last night, he's kind of wasting a lot of his money at this point because no matter how much money he pours into these races, people are pretty pissed off with Republicans right now, it would seem.
I was going to say to you, Brad, that Elon had an opposite trajectory to you, but I actually think it's a category error because as you see it, you haven't really changed much. You've been more static in your views, right?
My views haven't, I mean, I would say there's a couple issues where I've shifted, but my general views have not shifted since 2018.
Yeah. But for Elon, it really just feels like where before he was very trans positive and very DEI friendly, and, kind of this socially liberal, fiscally conservative guy. He had a very rapid, some might say descent, some might say, change of heart, transformation. But yeah, no, I'm curious. What are your what's your take on Elon generally as a person, as a force in the conservative movement?
I mean, I think at this point he's very negative. I mean, he's just become a troll. He has this massive platform that he uses to spread just transparently false information all the time, which I despise. I originally really liked Elon. I always respected him as a businessman. When he first started speaking politically, he said a fair number of things that I agreed with, but I think he got into an echo chamber. I think he's clearly believes that because he's a genius in some specific sub areas, he's a genius in all areas. Like this idea that, because I can make rockets fly or whatever, I must understand Social Security and I must be able to fix these things people dedicate careers to. And it's very frustrating to watch these people discover things that people like me have been talking about for nearly a decade. Or like the DOGE is discovering things that the Government Accountability Office highlights in their report every year. Talks about, like, they're like, oh my God, there are so many billions of improper payments in Medicare. Yeah, we know. We talk about it every year when that report comes out. Like, and to me, he's got a big head. He's got an ego. It also frustrates me, and this is one of my things because I'm more socially moderate, but I fight with a lot of the trad cons pretty regularly. How can you support this degenerate?
Right,
man?
right.
I was just about to say, man, that's a really interesting cultural bargain that conservatives have made with Elon, who is now in another public spat with another one of his baby mamas about
what's her name?
paternity tests
Ashley-
and Ashley St.
Ashley
Clair.
St.
I mean, it's
Clair.
just a really wild story. Like, how do you explain
Yeah,
it? Is it just because he has a shitload of money and people understand that he
They
can help?
don't give a fuck. They never
They don't
did.
care. Yeah, like they.
That's
I feel
my
and
take.
Some people do, man. People like
No,
Andrew
gives-
Wilson.
Wait.
Hush,
Who gives a
hush,
fuck
hush. Oh,
about
yeah.
like marital, the sanctity of marriage?
The tradcons, the people that
Look,
Brad
they
was
don't
no,
really
Hud,
give a shit.
No, they
They vote
don't
for
care
Trump.
because look. When an evangelical Christian voted for Trump in 2016, that's when I stopped taking all of what they're saying about traditional family
That's
seriously.
fair.
I
That's
don't know how you could possibly say I believe in, and at the very least you could say I care about it. It's just amongst my least priorities, right? Like maybe that's reasonable to say.
Here, let
Like,
me
hey,
push-
I care
let
about
me-
the low.
let me
Well,
pull it-
just
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
yeah. I was just finish my point. I was going to say, maybe I care about the tax cuts more than I care about like my president, the leader of my nation, the example that I send out to foreign countries, cheating on his wife constantly and fucking porn stars and saying he likes to sexually assault women. I just don't care about that as much as I care about the tax cuts. Maybe that's more coherent.
Let me push back a little bit. Okay. Let's say 2028, the Democratic candidate is a total fucking scumbag who violates all of your moral and ethical norms that you hold dear. But this person was poised to sign Medicare for all into law, and paid family leave, and a permanent.
Wait, he had a
extended
name.
child
His
tax
name was Bill
credits.
Clinton, and Democrats made no. I mean, like I don't respect Bill Clinton at all, and I think he has a lot of problems personally and socially had over the years. But I just think that Democrats don't have the same level of hypocrisy. I'm pretty sure there's probably these baseless rumors that Mike Johnson was on Grindr, but I'm pretty sure if everyone found out that he was cheating and on this app and just like messaging all kinds of people, that no one would give a fuck, and that Trump wouldn't.
Well,
give a fuck,
Pisco,
and
they'd
he
care
would
if
not
it
be
was
forced
Grindr
out.
because that would mean he was gay,
think so?
which of course would
Wait,
that
no,
would be a
do you really
problem.
think
No,
so?
look at Matt Schlapp.
100%. Yes.
Look at Matt Schlapp from CPAC. He's still in charge of CPAC as far as I'm aware. And he's had how many scandals now of guys coming out and accusing him of groping them at bars? It doesn't matter. Like he just flat denies and somehow survives
I
the
don't think it
scandals
would
every
matter.
time.
Maybe the modern woke Republican Party is okay with you cheating on your spouse with a man if you're a man. But no, I mean, yeah,
Brad, what do you
take the
think?
Pisco
Resolve this
line.
for us. You have your ear in
Yeah.
the conservative circles.
Well, I think most of them have decided that they don't care about personal character in a leader because a lot of them view the left as an existential threat, first of all, to the country. A lot of them have very real and valid concerns about many issues going on in the country, and they view Trump as somebody who's going to solve them. So what is one affair or 100 affairs more likely when it comes to, a border crisis, when it comes to thousands of kids being medically transitioned, all the things they'll be concerned about to them, or in their view, hundreds of thousands of unborn babies being killed. I can understand. I do believe character is important in a leader, but I can understand why, if you only have two options, you would hold your nose and vote for a terrible person who you think is going to be better for the country. I can understand that on the left or the right.
Wait, then I'm going to call
Yeah, of
BS on you
course.
before. Then I'm going to call BS on you before, Brad, because you had sort of chastised a little bit Hutch when he said, "Well, if it's a smart calculus, isn't it the same calculus that you're now giving some more, acquiescence to with respect to the personal leader of the person they're actually voting for, with respect to Democrats funneling money into the more MAGA candidate?" Can you separate those two in your mind about
Well, I think
why
the
you may
difference
be
is
sympathetic
that
for one?
in our system, you can literally only vote for the Democrat or the Republican for president. You literally only have two choices. Democrats didn't have to go into a handful of races and support election deniers, right? They could have done a million other things. And there are also, to be clear, Pisco, there are some principles I wouldn't compromise on.
Okay.
I wouldn't vote for, I'm trying to think of a good example, but like affairs.
Roy
and
Moore.
personal failings is one thing. I wouldn't vote for somebody who I knew had killed multiple people or who I knew had sexually assaulted a bunch of people, even if I thought they were the best person for the country. I think there's a limit there. My point is that some degree of personal indiscretions people can accept, and I see why they would. I'm also not
It's a threshold.
Who do you see as a greater threat?
I throw away my vote every time. So of course I'm happy to stand on principle. I don't care.
who do you see as a greater threat right now, the MAGA movement or the Democratic Party?
Threat to
Oof,
what?
that's a tough one.
Threat
To the constitutional order.
Yeah, that would be a good thing. Yeah.
However you would evaluate it.
Well, obviously MAGA's in power, so they're a bigger threat in the short term. Like Democrats can't do. What are you gonna do?
Well, let's extrapolate it. Let's extrapolate it to the long term. Like, who do you think has the potential to do
let me
more
say
damage?
this, that I think the future of the Democratic Party is named Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Hell yeah.
And I think she is a grave threat. I think based almost anything about Trump that you would concern that he would do, defy judicial orders, usurp the rule of law.
One comment, one time.
No,
one
she
comment,
stands by
one
it.
time.
She absolutely stands by it.
How do you know?
She is an authoritarian.
Wait. So based on the one comment she made about the student loan thing, which I don't agree with that comment.
About mifepristone.
What did she say about that? No, was it student loans or mifepristone? It was
Mifepristone.
mifepristone. You're right. No, you're correct. But that was one statement one time. I don't like it, but it is nothing compared to the kind of defiance that Trump not just says all the time, but actually exhibits in the case of just like not following direct court orders. He's already violated court orders willfully. It's clear there's going to be a hearing on it this week. And so based on one comment, you're willing to say AOC is an authoritarian?
But it's not one
That's
comment.
a stretch.
She wants to pack the Supreme Court of the United States, which is literally a dictator.
Wait, hang on a second. So I want to add members to the Supreme Court based on what the Republicans did back in with Merrick Garland's seat. I think
that is just as grave a threat to the rule of law as directly ignoring a federal court judge.
Would you say so? So would you equate, for example, what Mitch McConnell did and say that is just as much of a threat as adding 1 or 2 seats to the Supreme Court? Would you say those are the same degrees of harm?
What Mitch McConnell did with Merrick Garland is what you're referring to?
Correct. And the not giving even of any hearings to Merrick Garland. Would you say
And the double standard with Amy Coney Barrett, and just completely going back on that entire logic.
Let me separate two things. I disagreed. I think Merrick Garland should have gotten a vote. And I agree Republicans were deeply hypocritical with Amy Coney Barrett. I put that in the category of partisan toxicity. Adding justices to the Supreme Court is fundamentally breaking the system.
Well, why is that? But hang on, why is that? Because I understand under the Constitution, Congress has the authority to do that. And if they were to add a seat or two for partisan reasons, what's the difference between 2 branches signing off on it with the president signing off on it, and compare that to only one branch with the Senate? Really, just one guy, because Merrick Garland probably would have won if he had even gotten a vote. But yeah, compare that to one guy for partisan reasons affecting the balance of the court. I think it's totally arbitrary to say, just because one is a statute versus one just being the discretionary, not giving of a hearing of one guy.
The Senate has always exercised the ability to confirm or not confirm nominees, and that includes holding a vote. They haven't changed the number of Supreme Court justices in hundreds of years in general, but then I think ever for partisan advantage. And what would happen, Pisco, is very simple. Democrats will come in, they will increase the court, they'll pack the court with three new judges that will all be, of a certain ilk. It will uphold everything they want, like FDR threatened to do. And then Republicans will come in and they'll add 5 judges. And then Democrats will come in and they'll add 10 judges. And a few years from now, we will not have
we're already there, Brad. Right? So my question:
balance. We're not.
Do you consider what Mitch McConnell did to be a break in precedent? Yes or no?
A break in precedent?
Yes.
In terms of had it been done before? I don't think it had been.
So if it's a break in precedent, right? If it's a break in what the Senate is supposed to do, but frankly, just a waiver of the Senate's abilities. They did not even consider. They did not do their job in advice and consent. For my likes, that's completely negligent, completely reckless, completely destructive of what the Senate is supposed to do in that case. In what sense is it a graver threat to our democracy that a statute that has to go through 2 branches of Congress needs to be signed by the president, for which there will be electoral accountability if it goes too far? In what sense is one graver and one versus the other? If all we really care about here, Brad, is the partisan makeup of the court and the decisions that are being done, that's what people care about at the end of the day, and we didn't start it. It would be no different, by the way, if Republicans passed a law adding certain Supreme Court justices. Would you say Democrats shouldn't do that in response? Well, or would you be okay with them doing it in response? I'm
not sure what the right thing to do in that situation would be. If there'd be a way to just undo what the Republicans do, that's what Democrats should do.
That's what I'm proposing. Then that's what I think we should do. We should undo what Mitch McConnell did. Maybe pass a constitutional amendment to have it so it can't be gamed this way, but we should undo it.
Would you accept this compromise? Democrats add 4 members to the court, but then they say, as soon as 4 justices retire, keep it at 9. Okay, we undo our own thing.
15-year term limits. 15-year term limits.
That would skew the entire balance of the court.
Brad,
but it was
you're
already
getting it. Yes,
skewed.
you're getting it.
Yeah, it was skewed by a break in precedent. But this break in precedent gets to be sneaky, gets to be done with the unilateral decision of one person, Mitch McConnell, and people act as though that's less grave of a threat than a statute that has to go through bicameralism and presentment.
Okay, just calling something a statute. Yeah. I mean, the Alien and Sedition Act is a statute. Just calling something it's a statute that goes through Congress.
Oh no, I'm not saying there's more procedural protection there because it has to go through more channels. It has to go through both, and it's not just one guy. What I'm saying is what's worse for the Republic, that a statute be passed that has to go through 2 chambers, has to be signed by the president, or that one guy in the Senate say, hey, we're not even going to do our job today. We're going to hold this seat, and we're not even going to uphold our own precedent in the new term. And that, to me, is skewing the court in a break of, a complete break in precedent. And if it's a question of powers, well, we know the Senate, yes, you're right, has the power to do that. Congress has the power to add seats. So it's completely on all fours in every way.
What I would say is that then the appropriate response to what Mitch McConnell did is to do the exact same, if Democrats have control of the Senate.
But then you don't unfuck the court. I mean, you're still with a 6-3 conservative. Yeah. That doesn't seem like much.
If that situation doesn't present itself, there's no remedy.
The 6-3 conservative Supreme Court does, I guess you could say 1 seat difference, but the majority of conservative Supreme Court does reflect the presidential election results. It should be a majority. Okay, it's not rigged to be a majority. You could argue that there's a 1-seat differential that was unfairly taken.
I would argue that.
It's highly consequential.
So I would argue that. So with respect to 1 seat, at a bare minimum, couldn't you understand a Democrat that says, you just agreed, you think that, do you agree that there's at least, or you would say at most, but there is 1 unfairly taken seat on the Supreme Court? Would you say that?
I think Merrick Garland should have been allowed a vote, so yes.
Okay.
Though I love Neil Gorsuch, so I would be so sad if he wasn't on the court. He's my favorite.
Listen, I like Gorsuch better than I like Thomas and Alito. So and he was on the majority, and I think on the right opinion today. But that to be clear, if there's 1 unfairly taken seat, and if you agree with it, which you probably won't, but I think if the audience agrees with me, and I'll leave it there because I know that I'm taking up a lot of time, that the break in precedent of Merrick Garland, that is more disturbing in my mind, that kind of unilateral exercise, completely unconnected, a pure political calculus, than at the bare minimum a statute having to go through both houses and being signed by the president. Then I think you would understand the impetus. I don't think it's authoritarian for someone to say.
There's a reason that packing Supreme Courts is something typically done by dictators and authoritarian regimes. And I'll just say this, Pisco, if you do it, you will break the Supreme Court as an institution. It will lose all legitimacy within decades, and we will lose a meaningful check on the Supreme Court as a system of checks.
But that's what we said about Mitch McConnell. We said that about Mitch McConnell and what McConnell did.
It hasn't happened.
And so who's going to be accurate about that prognosis? If you say it hasn't happened, why would we be wrong by adding 1 more seat? How do you know that this time it will happen?
Because the number of justices has been set in stone for such a long. It should be actually. What I would say, Pisco, is there should be a constitutional amendment to set the number of justices at a certain amount. I'm actually open to the argument that I'm open to the argument that it should be more than 9, given the workload of the court. But you just have to do that. Yeah. That you'd have to do that in a nonpartisan way. I'm just telling you that if you expand the court to skew its ideological composition, so you can ram through your agenda. That is not a Pandora's box you can close once it's open.
Well, but Brad,
I value our system of checks and balances. The Supreme Court, in its current conservative iteration, ruled against Trump many times in his first term and reined in his excesses. And they will again this term. And Democrats have done so much to undermine the legitimacy of our judicial system. And they are
more
going
than they
to
have
regret
done themselves. This Supreme Court gave this a ruling in Trump versus United States that is beyond the pale. It is one of the worst decisions of the Supreme Court. Will go down with Dred Scott, will go down with Plessy v. Ferguson as an absolute shame and stain on this court based in no amount of precedent, no history, and no text of the Constitution. That decision completely has opened the Pandora's box of this wild theory of unitary executive theory to its absolute maximum. There is barely any rule of law in this country right now. I mean, just for an example, by the way, no one's fearing any kind of criminal prosecution after the fact, of course. But look at what's going on with the DOJ. And the DOJ, there is no threat of any criminal investigation into this motherfucker, what's his name,
Adams.
Mike Waltz and Signalgate, that kind of thing.
All that.
Donald Trump has absolutely no guardrails. There's no feeling of him to be hemmed in any possible way, and he is acting accordingly. That has been a destructive force, not just on the facial, words of the Constitution, the history of the Constitution, the purpose behind the Constitution, but in our actual daily lives. And so, to the extent that there's been a loss of legitimacy, it has been self-inflicted by the court, in my estimation.
No, I think they pushed false narratives about the Supreme Court, about Clarence Thomas. They've railed against trying to ignore Democrats tried to pack the Supreme Court. Many of them tried to ignore court rulings. All of this, the media has waged a campaign to delegitimize the conservative Supreme Court, even though you might disagree with many of its opinions. But all six, really, the only one who I think you might have an argument with is Clarence Thomas. They're very serious people with deeply held ideological beliefs about the law, and their opinions, you may disagree with some of them, they're not come to on a partisan basis. They don't just do whatever Trump wants, and that is the lie that has been told about them by mainstream
What's
media
your
outlets.
expectation? Wait, what's your expectation that if you pass a statute, add one or two justices, that they wouldn't also be serious people who? And I'm guessing I'm not hearing the name Sotomayor.
Well, actually,
Kagan
liberal justices
there.
vote in a block much more than the conservative justices, are much more predictably partisan. You can look at data from SCOTUS blog on that.
That doesn't mean they're not serious people. I mean,
I'm not actually saying they're not serious people, to be clear, but I am saying they are more predictably ideologically aligned with what you would expect with their party. The conservative judges have a bigger difference in their judicial philosophy between textualism, originalism, where it conflicts. So they aren't these partisan Trump hat wearing people who just red stamp the Trump. The problem, Pisco, is you're never going to just add one. They're going to add three. And then it's going to open a door where then Republicans will add 5, and then they'll add 7, and it will become a joke. Do you deny that will happen?
No, wait. So I think that you could absolutely have a tit for tat. But at the very minimum, in that situation, you are oscillating the court, and you're in a partisan way that's responsive to democracy. That isn't the case now. Right now, it's skewed improperly, unfairly, only on one side. At a bare minimum, it would be an improvement for the current status quo, which is we have an unfairly, by your lights, at least one justice, unfairly appointed, in complete break of precedent, Supreme Court, where it's skewed to the right all the time. So that would be a marked improvement. And my solution, I guess my compromise would be this. We propose a constitutional amendment to actually make it more fair, maybe in some of the manners that you described. And if they don't sign on to that effort, then might as well unskew and have it at least 50-50 be responsive to the people, because at the end of the day, right now the situation is untenable, in my opinion. I'm someone who, by the way, I was praising John Roberts up to that decision. I was even though I disagree so much with his rulings on many different cases, but recently, I mean, he has lost complete control of this court, and it shows. And I hope that he's going to be. I mean, because really, we don't have anyone left other than the federal judiciary to protect us against the excesses of Elon Musk and the rest. I don't have any confidence, and I know that my two friends, you guys don't have confidence that this Supreme Court, for example, would rule that.
I've been biting my tongue for this
Oh,
whole
I think the
conversation.
Supreme Court will absolutely rule against the Trump
I hope so.
administration
I
in
hope so.
meaningful ways.
I do hope so. And there was some, but just to give some indication, it was a 5-4 decision the other day on, oh God, now I'm not even remembering the facts and figures. It was like with respect to a judge's order and the unfreezing of certain assets, where it was completely improperly brought up to the Supreme Court in this fast track fashion, and there were 4 votes to put a stay on a judge's order that was clear as fuck. And to me, that indicates where we are at the court, where we're really just one Amy Coney Barrett, who I respect as a jurist more so than I would say the chief. I mean, but it's just really the chief that's going to decide these close questions on Trump stuff and on authoritarian stuff. And he's already shown his hand with Trump versus the United States that he's willing to do incredible damage to our constitutional order. And so I hope you're right, Brad.
Well, I think I really am biting my tongue on this one. We're circling the drain, though.
I know. I'm sorry.
On this topic,
I couldn't resist. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. The debate.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know what else you guys would necessarily want to talk about. I mean, we do, we've got some people that want to call in, but I guess in general, what are you guys? How are you adjusting your priors, right? Like, I think that's one question that I've had for myself is, I predicted Kamala would win in 2024. It's like, okay, I was wrong about that. How can I adjust my priors? When it comes to Trump, I've always found him to be a very difficult guy to predict. And I feel like some of the things that I'm telling myself about this current term is, okay. I think Trump is a little bit more willing to kind of do what he says he's going to do.
Yeah.
He seems to be a little bit less bound by like the conservative neocons who were, had clearly a large power sharing arrangement with Trump in his first term. I think that the next big fight that they're going to have is they're going to have to actually pass a budget over the summer, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it's like the early fall. One thing I'm curious about is like, what's that going to look like? Because at the same time that they want to cut deficit spending, they also want to have hundreds of billions of dollars of extra spending for border enforcement. So, what do we think the Trump administration's priorities are going to be in the next 7-8 months for the rest of the year? I mean, good God, it's been less than 3 months, and it feels like we've had a year's worth of news already.
Well, I think they were always going to have a hard time with this budget just because of how close the margins are in the House, and Mike Johnson just really doesn't have any wiggle room. They just backed off of Elise Stefanik because they're concerned about that seat. But if you add on top of that the fact that we are very certainly headed into some volatile economic circumstances here, I think it just makes his job a lot harder. Like, you're going to have a lot more pressure on a lot more Republican representatives in sensitive districts to moderate. And so I have I mean, Brad, do you think they're going to be able to pass this budget? I mean, Trump is asking for one big, beautiful reconciliation package, but that is going to be tough, I think.
No, they'll just end up doing another CR. None of them. They'll just end up doing another CR, and they'll probably CR their way through most of the Trump presidency. They're never going to, they can't agree because they've made all these promises that don't add up about how I saw Trump today say we're going to pay down the debt. So not even just balance the budget, but start paying down the debt. But also, we're not going to cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, or the military budget.
And we're going to cut taxes.
And we're going to cut taxes.
Right.
The math doesn't math. I mean,
it's possible. You definitely do it. But
you can't do it. You can't do it based. Could you do it with all discretionary spending?
I think he's being
of course.
sarcastic.
I mean, we could.
Oh, there. Never mind.
No, I mean, we could. No, I mean, you can run $2 trillion deficits. Obviously, with regards to like how that would affect the economy.
No, but paying down the debt.
But he said balancing he said doing that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, you're correct. You're correct that absent huge like pre-Bush era tax increases, which look, I'm all for. I love paying taxes. Okay, I want to pay more taxes.
I can see Brad's eyes twitching.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, but like in general, like you could do that obviously, but yeah, Trump's never been serious about closing the deficit. The question is like with take the Elise Stefanik situation. If you do have a scenario where like a couple of Republicans end up dying or leaving office or resigning for one reason or another, and all of a sudden Thomas Massie is like actually maybe more relevant,
a kingmaker, a kingmaker.
Well, no, I mean that is where it really the rubber meets the road essentially in that scenario, right? Because Thomas Massie's marginalized right now, and
but
the
Trump
reason why Republicans
primary him, I don't think he would lose.
Well, I don't know that Trump can primary him, but at the very least, what we can say is Thomas Massie's a real one with principles. I disagree with everything that he believes in, but he is a real one, and I think that the rubber meeting the road in that scenario, which I think that for the most part they've had to like very ardently work around him, even with the margin now, is that they are not willing to do what Thomas Massie wants because they know it would be radically unpopular. And I think it would be bad for the economy as well, but it would be radically unpopular at the very, very least. And so, but
it's a non-starter.
Because the
They're
Democrats,
no.
Well,
I wish they would.
Yes and no, but like I think that the trouble is that at least Democrats in the House, not talking about Schumer because he's a coward and we don't like him anymore, but Democrats in the House at the very least have said, look, we're not playing ball. Okay, if you want to come to us to cut billions of dollars out of Medicare and Social Security, absolutely fucking not. So I mean, the prospect is like either basically like record length government shutdown or work with Thomas Massey at some point. I mean, maybe you're right, Brad. Like maybe they're willing to just do CRs over and over and over again and just expand the deficit. Which
No,
I
but
guess
more-
that to
more-
me that would be better than the opposite.
That's what's
But
going to happen.
More than the budget, they have an agenda that he's trying to execute on. They want to do big immigration stuff, tax cuts, and 3 other things with the reconciliation package. And
Right.
as the economy
But
worsens,
they can't do
that
immigration with reconciliation, though, can they?
they're
They can
talking
fund
about it.
border. They can fund border
stuff.
enforcement, right? And so,
right, but they
if
can't change actual immigration laws.
Well, but Brad, they clearly don't give a fuck about that anyway. So who cares about the law? They just need the money to put people into vans and kick them out of the country. So, if they're willing to spend on it, then,
Well,
maybe the goal would be
it's interesting you bring that up. I've been getting a lot of flack because I do believe due process is a human right, and I do believe due process is a constitutional right that illegal immigrants are entitled to, and legal immigrants are entitled to. So I've been getting a lot of.
I've been seeing you post
Based,
about that,
Brad.
but you're not the only one. I mean, they lost Joe Rogan on this issue, which is not a small thing. I mean, like he's been a pretty eager Trump supporter, and he was speaking with like high levels of condemnation about this. I mean, he was speaking about it.
I think Trump obviously does have a mandate to deport actual criminals who are in here, like actual gang members. I even think most Democrats agree with that. But nobody asked him to deport gay makeup artists from Venezuela to El Salvadorian prisons for terrorists. No one asked for that, and that is evil.
It's super evil, and one of the things that I really appreciate about this conversation is, we disagree on stuff, we disagree on the judiciary, but and I guess that you would feel that is like a structural thing about our democracy. But at the bare minimum, I think the individual rights component here, there's a mutual appreciation for. And yeah, I would agree that he has a mandate to deport, especially criminals who are here illegally. I mean, that's, I think, beyond a doubt. The question, though, is, what's the cost of that, and what are you willing to give up? And people don't seem to understand, or at least the MAGA faithful don't seem to understand that any kind of cutback on their First Amendment rights, right? If there's a new precedent that says that these national security rationales are as elastic as the Secretary of State's bare assertions, then we're really in trouble with your First Amendment rights. And the next time they want to try to intrude on you, and same thing with due process. They're in court right now saying, once you're in SICAT, once you're in this El Salvadorian prison, the courts are deprived of jurisdiction to do anything about it. That would apply both to U.S. citizens and to legal permanent residents, illegal immigrants. Yeah, take your pick. So I praise you for having that kind of consistency.
Yeah, well, Fiscal, I'll say the one thing that I'm, like I told you, is free speech is one of my very consistent values.
Mm-hmm.
This thing where, like, I think people who commit crimes is a different story. If you're on a student visa here and you took over buildings or committed actual crime, charge them with a crime, and then yes, you could revoke their visa. But simply because you hate their speech, you view them as pro Hamas or whatever. I think Hamas is horrible, but do they not get that President AOC could just as easily say that the government of Israel is a terrorist government and that pro-Zionist students are supporting terrorism, and we're going to revoke all their student visas, but one by one? Do they not think 5 steps ahead? That's the thing that's so frustrating for me.
Well, but Brad, I think the answer is that they really don't. And in part, it's because you see a lot, a lot of this is reflective in the polling of Republicans. Like when Republicans are asked, do you think Trump should run for a 3rd term? About half of Republicans just straight up say yes to that, right? When you start to ask Republicans, well, I was going to say, when you start to ask, if you ask Republicans, there are other questions like this, hey, what do you think is more important, democratic procedure or having a strong leader? Republicans are overwhelming that they do not prioritize democratic procedure on that question. And, I'm not going to sit here and say that, all Republicans are secret fascists and authoritarians, but I think that and you see this all throughout history, right? That there's just a lot of people who really just don't prioritize democracy. They don't prioritize individual rights or procedure when it comes to these things. And I think that, you do see this reflective more so in Republicans polls presently. I think that Democrats have sort of been partisanly triggered in the other direction, where I think this has caused Democrats to take that a lot more seriously, which is why you don't see nearly as many swings in this regard from Democrats, even when it comes to Democratic leadership. Essentially what I'm saying is the cult of personality of Trump is so strong that Democrats almost have adopted, like in some sense, an anti-cult personality in some of the polling. Like, we all hate our leadership right now. Fuck them, get rid of them. And so, I think that's maybe that's a good thing for protecting individual rights. But
my hot take is I think that Trump does have some constitutional methods to obtain a third term.
Give me the broad strokes about
you
that.
could get an amendment, but what else, Fiscal?
So the constitutional text of the 22nd Amendment says no person shall be elected.
Cringe.
And I think that elected, if you look at the drafts, I think they actually changed it from eligible to elected. And it's different than the other qualifications for office, which speak in terms of eligibility, or in the 14th Amendment, Section 3, holding office. And so that distinction to me matters, and it seems like it was an intentional distinction if you're taking.
But he can't run for he can't run for VP, right?
He can run for PvP because the 12th Amendment. And guys, I know what you're going to. Fuck out of here.
No, explain it then. Explain
it. The 12th Amendment, the last sentence of the 12th Amendment says that you have to have all the qualifications for president. But if this is just a ban on being elected, so here's the example. Let's say Trump is never stands for another election again, but he is appointed to be vice president after there's a vacancy, and then there's another vacancy in the presidency. Would he be eligible to be president under those circumstances? I think the answer, based on just the text of the Constitution, is yes. And if he's eligible to be president in that situation, then he has the qualifications to be president, and therefore the last sentence of the 12th Amendment shouldn't apply. And so, and I think that that's intentional. And if you read the drafting, I think that that's backed up by that, and that they were waiting and trying to make it so that there could be an acting president situation in those circumstances. So I actually think that listen, I'm going to be honest, straightforward with you all the time. I think that there are methods there. I just don't, obviously I think it's bad to do, but
call me naive, but even if you were right, I do think that would be a bridge too far, even for Republican voters. Yeah. For the voters, I mean, I think you would find a small pocket of maybe 30% of Republican voters, or 35 or whatever. That would, I guess the numbers say it's about 44%. Right. Yeah. We just,
I could not disagree with Hutch more. I do not think Republicans would give a shit if they saw Donald Trump run for vice president. I think they would.
Well, again, it's like technically over half of Republican voters are opposed to the idea of him running for a third term. Now would that change if it actually?
They also liked
maybe?
Zelensky for a while, Hutch, and that seemed to go away pretty fast.
I don't know. Look, I'm always willing to say that there's misinformed voters on both sides, but I do happen to think that they're. Presently speaking, I think that the Republican base of people do have like genuinely worse opinions on things than the Democratic base. And I think this is just one of those issues that we would see an immediate like 180 on. At the very least, what we would see is like, typical to the evangelicals voting for a guy who cheats on his wife all the time. We would see, look, I don't like that Trump's running for VP, but I'll vote for President Don Jr., with Trump as his vice president or something.
I'm worried we'll get Don Jr. next.
Oh, that's my prediction right now.
I would be more concerned about Vance than him, because I don't think.
I actually will say that, Hutch. I can't stand JD Vance, and he scares me more than Trump. Actually,
well, he's just sharper.
More than Trump or Trump Jr.
Both. Because Vance is actually very intelligent. Actually, knows a great deal, but is then still willing to do whatever it takes to get power. And I genuinely think. Maybe I'm wrong, but I actually don't think Trump will, for example, defy a Supreme Court ruling, which would genuinely cause a constitutional crisis. I don't think he will. I think Vance very well might. I think Vance would go full Andrew Jackson on the country potentially, and I really worry about that.
He invoked Jackson in some advice for Trump a couple years ago, right?
By that.
Well, Vance openly tweeted that he doesn't think these judges have the power to stop the executive from doing what they want. And to be fair, I think Josiah and I have been somewhat consistent on this in saying, yes, it's true that in some practical sense, where's your army to enforce these rulings, Mr. Court? Like that is a real thing. But obviously there's a precedent here. There's like a general ethos of understanding that you will abide by Supreme Court rulings, or at the very least you should have other legal justification for, doing certain things that the executive would want to do if the Supreme Court blocks it under certain legal justifications, similar to the Biden student loan thing. At the very least, that's a much more procedural way to go about things. But yeah, I think JD Vance, for a number of reasons, probably is more scary than Don Jr. But yeah, it's hard to say what the 2028.
I think a Democrat will win anyway in 2028.
Look, we can only hope, Brad. AOC, let's do it. You and me.
It's not going to be. It's not going to be AOC. It's going to be fucking Bashir. No, it's not. You and my dad both think that the Democratic Party is way more kind of socialist than I think it
I
actually
think
is.
Jasmine Crockett will be the vice presidential nominee if things keep up on their current.
No, she's
Brad,
No shot.
she's too much
You're
of a
preaching
loose
to me,
cannon.
Brad.
Wait,
People
wait.
love
okay.
her. The Democrat base loves her. The power brokers in the mainstream media adore her,
And I love her.
She's good at getting clicks, but you gotta wait.
Terrible, but
Well,
Look, I think obviously, yeah, go on, Pisco, sorry.
Oh, I was going to ask, in the spirit of difficult questions, following the Tim Pool exchange, I was wondering if you had to, right? You can't do a little libertarian switch out here. If you had to pick Trump third term, right? So Trump third term, so it would have to be a Trump third term, and you're voting, and for whatever reason, the Trump third term thing pays off. Trump third term or AOC first term, who you voting for? You have to pick.
gun to my head,
Yeah.
the gun can't go off.
it can go off.
It
can go
Yeah.
off.
No,
Your life is
no,
threatened.
you can't
It's a
kill
TikTok
yourself. You
challenge.
have to pick.
Is it like
Brad.
an unconstitutional Trump third term, or is it a real,
Yeah,
like a
sure.
legitimate?
Yeah. It's unconstitutional, but like the court says it's a political question. We think it's unconstitutional, but we're not allowed to rule on it. They would never say it like that, but basically they show their hand that it's unconstitutional, but they can't resolve it.
If I thought that Trump serving a third term was legit just unconstitutional and he was just violating that, then I would, and I had to vote for one of the two, then I would probably vote for AOC.
Base
Hey,
Brad.
Thomas
Hey.
Massey. We got a
If you
Thomas
click
Massey over
that,
here.
I'm cooked.
Okay. No, thank you for
That's
sticking
the
to your
rational
principles.
thing to do.
Well, Brad, I don't know how much time you have. We usually go for another 30 minutes. Sometimes we take viewer call-ins, but if you have to go at any time, then feel free to make your leave.
No, I can do 30. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Did you have some people that wanted to get in there?
Yeah, we don't have I don't know how to share the link. This is all Josiah. Here we go. Copy invite link. And I guess I can put it in the stream, the various stream
Hey,
chats.
no shirtless
somehow.
men this time, all
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Watch that guy's off the hook.
Yeah, that guy's a little bit strange. That's a fair statement. Here, let me see. Talk amongst yourselves, and I'll get it all set
Yeah,
up.
sure. So, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say. In the meantime, I'm curious, Brad, as to how you think the next couple of years are going to play out. What do you think? I mean, we're a little removed, but what do you think about the midterms? I mean, certainly last night was, we had two races in Florida, right? And Democrats both lost by double-digit points, but it was a remarkable shift towards Democrats, and they've proved to be just much more highly engaged when Trump is not on the ballot. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think some of the Republican candidates in Florida were uniquely flawed. Randy Fine comes to mind. But I expect Democrats to do well in the midterms. They did in the first time Trump was president. There's going to be Republicans will get complacent, and the Democrat base will get energized and show up to vote.
All right, Nathaniel, we've got my favorite left-wing Catholic on the call. What did you want to talk to us about?
Okay, I got two questions. One for Pisco and one for Mr. Economics Boy. I just question about the flags in your background, Econo Boy. I get the American flag, but why two pride flags in the back? I'm not quite sure what the decision making was there.
Are you like from
Listen, okay,
Oklahoma?
No, he's a New Yorker, okay? And he's from Pennsylvania.
How you doing?
But
How you doing?
look, the Texas flag, we've got one of the best flags in the entire union, okay? One of the best ones. All these other state flags, for the most part, suck, including the New York state flag.
Personally,
New York
okay?
State flag
Terrible flag.
sucks.
The Maryland
It
flag
really
is
does.
my favorite flag.
Oh,
Okay?
Maryland flag is sick, bro.
No,
Maryland looks great.
I
You
live
can
in
really
New York. I'm
pull it out.
from Maryland, but anyway. Second question for Pisco about New York. Who you looking for in the mayoral race? Okay, I'm working with an organization. We're doing some stuff with the candidates, but it hasn't happened yet. So I'm like,
When is the
not
primary?
Cuomo,
What's the date?
not Adams.
It's in
That's
June.
kind of what I'm looking at.
June.
So,
for the primary.
Cuomo's dominating right now, is he not?
Yeah, I am going to
Doing very
pass
well.
on that question, other than to say for now, other than to say that I'm looking to get involved in some ways, and I will let the people know about any decision I make
Pisco's
and what
running
I'm
for
doing.
mayor.
I'm not
That's
running for
what I
mayor.
heard.
I'm not at all running for mayor, but I will say the following. Mayor Adams is one of the most corrupt individuals that we've ever seen in our lifetime. It actually is frankly disqualifying, in my opinion, for Hakeem Jeffries, for Leader Schumer, and for Governor Hochul to have not called on him to resign at a bare minimum.
Did you see what book he was holding up today at the press conference?
No, I didn't see his press conference. The guy makes me sick to my stomach. But
he held up a Kash Patel. He held up a Kash Patel book on the deep state.
So this guy. So I will be voting in the Democratic primary for not Kathy Hochul. I will be voting in a primary against Schumer. And if I were in Jeffries' district, I would be voting against Jeffries for their inability to call on this corrupt, MAGA-infused Democratic mayor. I mean, look, they're criminal Democrats running the city, and we can't hold them to account. That is a shame, and so it's disgusting. So I would never vote for Mayor Adams. But on the other stuff, stay tuned.
Which sucks because it's really funny,
There's a lot of people, Pisco, in the chat. They're calling for it. They're calling for Pisco for mayor in the chat.
No,
okay,
it would never happen. It would never happen.
DM me after this. I'm working with an organization for NRL stuff. So
you DM me, bro. All right, you DM me.
I'm already a mod on your server. I've DM'd you before.
Wait, you're a mod on my server?
On Live and Learn.
Got it. Thanks.
All right. Well, I'll see y'all later.
Thanks, buddy.
All right, see you later, GD.
You're supposed to have questions for Brad, guys.
Well, I wanted to ask you guys to sort of like shoot the shit about your respective Tim Pool appearances here. I mean, can you guys talk about like what is it? So explain to me what it's like. Okay, so he flies you out, you stay at a hotel, and then you go to his skate compound, and then what happens?
It's in bumfuck nowhere. You go
the rooms are big
from DC. I mean, his staff was nice. They paid for it, but I wouldn't absolutely not do it again. For me, the problem was not one, I mean, he was unhinged, but also it's like he generally wasn't interested in my perspective or hearing what I had to say. He was just interested in screaming at me. And about 10 minutes in, I was like, also, because I do a daily podcast and I had to take a couple days off doing it to go out there. And it's like, I forego income, I forego my revenue, my job to go do this. And I realized about 10 minutes in, wait, I'm a prop for him to yell at for a clip. He's not actually interested in what I have to say. I shouldn't have come here. This was a waste of time.
You could read that on your face, by the way. Your face was very much exuding like, why the fuck am I here?
Yeah.
Like, pretty much right away. Yeah.
And so then I was like, screw it, whatever. I'll say my piece and then I'll just let him pop off and then I'll just get out of here immediately. So it was a terrible experience. I've had several friends who were invited on ask me if they should do it. And I told each of them no. And I'm pretty open to the media stuff. I'll do stuff with different people. It's not like, he disagreed with me or he wasn't nice to me or he wasn't friendly. He wasn't. That's not even it. It's that like it generally wasn't. I guess it ended up being worth my time because frankly, the clips got a lot of
exposure.
Traction,
yeah.
And I got a lot of exposure. And that's why I went there and that's why I did it. But I wouldn't recommend people do it if they're expecting any semblance of a good faith conversation.
Did you see any of Pisco's clips? Because my God, that was really something.
I want to watch your episode. I saw a couple clips where you were making the point I agree with about not deporting people because of their viewpoints and it being.
Yeah.
I think obviously it needs to be litigated, but I think it should be a First Amendment issue to be doing that.
I think it absolutely should be as well.
Sean Jenkins, caller in. What did you want to talk to us about? And you better have a mic ready. I'm a quick trigger. You got like 3 seconds to say something, or I'm putting you in the back room. All right, I'm putting him in the back room. I'm sorry I interrupted. For an unprepared caller.
I was just going to say.
How long have you been making content?
Very recently, I used to go on Destiny's stream a lot. And I used to also go on like these Twitch debate panels as well. So I started off doing these Twitch debate panels with this guy Prime Kai, who was
also on Tim Pool just recently.
Also on Tim Pool recently.
He did pretty good actually, I thought.
Yeah. But I would stream occasionally and stuff. But I really started my channel in January, and I've gotten like subs and stuff, so that's been really cool. And the debate with Tim Pool, I've seen an uptick as well in like subs and members and that kind of shit. So that's been great. My experience with Tim Pool is very different than yours. I'm not denigrating your experience, Brad. Your experience is completely valid, and everyone should respect it.
My truth.
It is your truth, and that is a type of truth. I had a very different perspective. I was coming in with like the lowest possible expectations. The food was not great. I'm just gonna say the food, not at his compound, but like just in general in the area. I had one like Mexican place, and it was disgusting. That said, the room was spacious. The people were delightful. His staff were super nice to me.
Yep, his staff were nice. Yeah,
incredibly nice.
About his staff.
And I'm going to be honest with you, Tim was very nice with me, and maybe it was the fact that it was on.
He really wasn't nice to me or friendly to me at all, which was just weird because I'd met him before. I'd been on the show before years ago, and that's what maybe set the stage for it. Is like, I don't know, maybe he just doesn't like me because of my Twitter takes or whatever. But that's fine.
It could be, and I also think possibly because I was kind of ragging on the other person there, and it was kind of he got to be in like. The producer.
He was more of a moderator.
Although eventually it turned it into me and him debating each other. But yeah, no, maybe because of that dynamic,
Well, I was there with somebody who's really.
Oh, never mind then.
Elijah Schaefer, who.
What the fuck? That guy's a crazy motherfucker.
Absolutely crazy, beyond the pale. I don't really want to bother speaking about him, but I realized and he was rambling about incoherent stuff during our debate that really was totally off topic, and it was just him like casually being racist for a lot of it. So then I ended up just debating Tim because Tim at least was speaking about the subject of free trade and immigration. Elijah was going on like long anecdotes about how he doesn't like being checked out by a brown person at Walmart when he gets his cheap PlayStation or something. I don't mean to caricature what he was saying, but like it wasn't that far removed from that.
No, you're not exaggerating. I watched the entire thing.
It was something about like Haitians checking him out at Walmart or GameStop or something, right, Hutch? I can't really remember the details.
Yeah.
But I remember sitting there and being like, what the fuck?
No. Well, but my conservative was a lot more hinged, and he was arguing that like I don't know, that Abraham Lincoln was a tyrant that deserved to. Although maybe you agree with this, so I don't know.
Was he hinged? Sounds a little unhinged to me.
More hinged than Elijah Schaefer, I'll say that.
Who was it?
He got animated, but he didn't like scream. The guy that you were debating or whatever.
Who are you talking to?
Sean Jenkins. He claims to have fixed his mic problem. Sean Jenkins, fixed mic. What do you want to talk to us about?
Am I live?
You're live.
You're live. We hear you.
Oh boy. I had a question for Econo Boy. Do you think there's any veracity to the claims that the U.S. dollar might not be the reserve currency with the way the tariffs are going?
I don't think the tariffs would be the death blow in that regard. Now, we do see a long-term trend of U.S. Basically like dollar reserves going down over time. I think it's gone from like 90% over the course of the last several decades to like 70% or something like that. So, you do see this kind of like long-term diversification in dollars held in reserve. And now keep in mind, I think, people kind of overinflate the importance of that. Now, of course, it's good that there's a lot of countries that are kind of invested in the U.S. dollar, but let's just say that goes down to proportional to the economic size, right? The U.S. is 30% of world GDP, and whatever, that comes to, all right, 30% might be an overexaggeration, but, the U.S. is like 10%, 20% of world GDP, and now all of a sudden, dollars in reserve are 10 or 20% as well. That's not exactly a good thing for America's soft power, but there's a lot of countries on the planet who, every other country besides the United States doesn't have this power. And there's a lot of countries with growing economies, with egalitarian institutions, with welfare states that they can fund, with debt that they can issue in the time of a recession, things like that. So I do expect this to be bad for those goals of keeping the dollar to be the dominant currency, but it won't be the death blow. But we also, at the same time, will see probably the dollar become less relevant over the long term as these other economies start to develop, as people start to diversify away from the U.S. economy. But that doesn't mean, like so many people seem to imply, that the U.S. economy will collapse into oblivion as well.
Well, I guess that's good news.
There you go. Any other questions, Sean?
No, I would ask a question for Brad, but I just don't know enough about his background to do so. But he's been a great guest so far. Thanks.
No, he has been a great guest.
Thank you.
All right, good talking, Sean. Anybody else wants to call in? There's the link below. Go on, Hutch.
Well, I was just going to make a comment that I've been watching Tim Pool's content for quite some time, just because it's just a content farm for, left wingers or whatever. But one thing that I have noticed, and, tell me if you guys agree, but he's been doing this thing recently where he just gets so performatively angry. Like, you can tell he's trying to add a lot of bluster and sort of puff up like a pufferfish. And so it could just be that he was in a mood just particular mood the day
No,
that
that
you
was
went, Brad,
actually
but he
it,
was-
like it felt fake. How
Yeah.
emotional he was getting about free trade policy and how he was calling me evil and screaming and like spit flying out of his mouth. It's like I think there must be some value to him that when he can have these clips of him coming unhinged for like a 2-minute clip or whatever go viral, it must really draw more people to his show or something. There must be some sort of incentive structure there where that's what it was very clear to me, Hutch, that was something he was strategically choosing to do. It was very clear.
I think that was obvious. Yeah.
Ukraine is the enemy of these people.
No, but it's like that. But he's just way more. I mean, if you look at his when Luke Beasley went on without Josiah, it was a little bit better with Josiah. But when it was just Luke Beasley, he fully lost his shit on Luke and started accusing Luke.
I remember. And then they actually dishonestly clipped Luke afterwards. I actually like him. Obviously, I disagree with him on most things, but
you're a Beasley fan?
I see his YouTube channel, and he seems to be doing very well, and I appreciate. I don't know. I've seen about him. I thought he handled himself well on Tim Pool.
I think he had that show with a MAGA lady, and that ended. I think it ended.
There was only so many legs.
Isabella Moody one.
Yeah.
So, listen. I know the tea about her. I know the tea about her husband. I'm not going to speak on it, but
there's tea.
Hold on, you can't tee that up and then not say.
No, you can. You can. We're not gonna push you. We're not gonna push you.
Fake. You rewind the clock for Isabella. Her name used to be Isabella Riley, and she in like 2018 she was a libertarian, or 2019 she used to DM me all the time. She was a huge fan of mine, and then she started posting all this increasingly unhinged stuff. So I would DM her and it'd be like, babe, what are you talking about? Women don't have to be in the kitchen. Like, this is not a libertarian take. Like, whatever. And she's like, don't worry, it's just trolling. It's just trolling.
Right. It's very obvious. It's very obviously bait. It's very obviously
this performative thing. And that's why I almost wish, I know it gets him views, and I understand, trust me, I get the content creation game. I do this too. But it would be more interesting to see Luke Beasley sit down and talk to people who were like Trump supporters, but not like absolutely unhinged and purposefully trying to be as crazy as possible for views.
All right, Fazboy, another caller calling in. Hopefully your mic works. What do you want to talk to us about?
All right.
Hey.
We can hear you. Ask your questions. All right, Fazboy, you've lost your chance. I can't believe it. 2 in a row,
That was a
guys.
serial killer, and I'm scared now. I'm shook. That was a fucking serial killer, guys. We're so fucked.
Average Live and Learn audience member. Very dangerous serial killer, if I had to guess. Yeah, I don't know. That's the feeling that I get as well. I feel like audience capture is very much a real thing. We see this with politicians, right? I mean, that's an audience capture of a sort where like so many Republican politicians go from being, neocons.
Nancy Mace, yeah.
Yeah, like neocons to Tea Party members to MAGA heads. It's like, look, Lindsey Graham was a guy when he ran in 2016 when he didn't think Trump was a serious political candidate, was talking about how much he hated Trump and how much Trump is going to kill the party and this and that.
Rubio, Vance, now, all of them.
Yeah. I mean, these guys all just immediately change their mind when it becomes convenient to them. And I think that's true with people who make who commentate on these videos as well. I think there's probably some exceptions. Like, I think that Joe Rogan's genuinely just kind of a dumb guy who kind of like goes with the wind. Like, I'm not sure that he's like grifting, but when it comes to people like Tim Pool and Ben Shapiro, it does seem clear to me that they're very much willing to kind of like alter their opinions in relation to where the audience discourse is going, which sucks. I mean,
Ben a lot less than Tim Pool.
I would say so, yeah.
I mean, Ben will do. I am not a fan of him, and I disagree with him on a lot. But like, he'll do a whole episode this week, I'm sure, about why he disagrees with Trump's tariffs. Trump could go like. Trump could become a hardcore I know he isn't, but he could become anti-Israel, and Ben would not become anti-Israel. Like, Ben actually believes certain things. He will move on a lot, but I've always thought he has some actual values, and he does have some things he stays consistent on.
So does Tim Pool. I mean, I think there were some instances even during Pisco's conversation where Tim was like, yeah, I would disagree with this, or I would go this way. But anyway, Logan, another caller. Please, God, tell me your mic works.
Hello.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
We hear you.
Yeah.
Loud and
clear.
We
hear you.
Great. As a new young Kamala voter, I really appreciate you guys' content. I have 2 questions for y'all.
Love to hear
for Pisco, with Tim Pool obviously being dragged around in that debate, who do you want next?
Who do I want next?
To debate?
Yeah,
you mean?
like
Who's your
what kind of
call-out
big
piece,
debater
dude?
do you want to debate? Like Andrew Wilson, that kind of guy, or do you want
Andrew
Already
Wilson has said that he will not debate me unless I personally give him thousands of dollars, and so
Why? He debates everyone.
I mean, it's a
Clown.
consistent thing.
Clearly not.
There's even been, I will tell you, there have been people who have tried to have us have a debate together, organize it, that I have not initiated at all, and that position has not at all wavered. He will not debate me unless I, out of principle, will never pay that motherfucker thousands of dollars
He's
to debate
scared.
him. So if I had to pick one person, it'd probably be like Donald Trump, but I'm joking. Like the influencer. I would love talking to a Shapiro. I would love talking to let me think, other motherfuckers. Charlie Kirk. I would love to do Charlie Kirk, not to do him.
Anna
you know,
Kasparian, Fiscal.
Anna Kasparian, who I consider now, a closeted MAGA person in many ways. That's a little
I
bit
don't
too
think
far.
so.
That's
No,
a little
I
too
agree.
far.
I agree.
All right,
No.
it's a little too far.
How much
But
do you watch
someone
the Young Turks? Because
I
see
watched
them
the Young
criticizing-
Turks.
I
know.
see them criticize Elon and the Trump administration a lot.
I know. Listen. I immediately said that's a little too far. But what I will say is that someone like Cenk or anyone on the on TYT network, these are people that I've criticized very, very heavily in recent months, and so I would love to discuss with them. I probably went too far by saying that she's full on MAGA.
UV Benny Johnson, I think, would be a fun one.
That would also be awesome. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
All right,
won't
Logan.
even get
Second
into the Bernie
question.
tea.
My second question
Oh,
is
is
for
there tea?
everybody in here.
Wait. No.
go
Let Brad tell
That
us
is all the tea.
the
Oh, no,
tea.
go ahead, go ahead.
If you DM me later, I'll tell you the
Okay,
tea.
all
I'm
right,
not
all
gonna
right.
Spill the tea on here though, not my place.
All right, Logan,
Well-
you had a second question?
Yeah, second question, guys. Kind of for everybody, but more towards like Pisco and Hutch, since I watch both of them the most, I guess. But what's your
Yes.
opinions on Elon like leaving the office soon? Is he still gonna like fund elections and stuff like that, or is he?
Well,
gonna
yes, he is. But like we all knew there was going to be some kind of a breakup. I think we were talking about it on Live and Learn, like taking bets on how long it would be. I thought it would be between like 6 and 9 months that he would sort of step away from the administration. But the fact that he's stepping away so quickly now is just a really strong indication that the Republican Party clearly at this point views him as toxic. And I think the data, bears that out.
I think as long as he's in charge
Yeah,
of
it's
X, as long as he's in charge of one of the major social media networks, and as long as he's giving money, he's going to be influential. Now, whether that means the same kind of prominent role, I'm not sure. But my sense is, there are people who will buy what he's selling.
Exactly. So long as wealth inequality is so high, the rich will always have disproportionate influence in our politics, unfortunately. So that's kind of my prediction as well. I think he'll kind of stay involved. I don't think he's going to revert back to like 2018 Elon, who kind of tried to probably had a more true, like trying to play both sides, trying to kind of keep out of politics and the political spotlight. I don't think that'll happen anytime soon. He'll be the Republican Soros for at least a good clip.
It is kind of
What
funny.
do you think, Brad?
I will say, as somebody who's existed on the right and in right-wing media, I was never that concerned about George Soros because this stuff doesn't bother me. We probably disagree fundamentally a lot on that, but it is funny to see like how many things a lot of Republicans are cheering on now that if Soros had done them, they would have gone apoplectic about.
Well,
but
look,
Elon's
the
doing it now, so
consistent
it's good.
progressives, we've always hated the George Soroses and the Michael Bloombergs, all right? We've been very consistent on that. Logan, it was good having you
Yep,
a call
thank
in.
you,
I'm going to
guys.
put you in the
Thank you.
backstage. We got another caller in, Henry Dogood, a regular caller in. Henry, what did you want to talk about?
That's a strong name, Henry.
It is.
Oh, no, you're
Your
muted,
mic's
Henry.
fucked, bro.
Am I going to have to put you in the backstage because your mic?
No. Give him.
Oh,
give him,
my
give him 10
God.
seconds.
Don't be
Henry.
nervous. Everyone's watching you.
Give him 10 seconds.
Everyone's watching you. Okay, 10,
He's got
9.
10.
Don't panic, but
8.
everyone is judging you right now.
7.
No one's.
No, we can't hear you. 6, 5.
We're all making fun of you in our
No.
heads, but don't let
No,
that stress you out.
Henry.
Henry, look, just fix your mic in the background. Put it in the chat when it's
Just
fixed.
mouth it. I can read lips. Oh, okay, whatever. That's fine.
Anyway, Brad, I guess one interesting question that I had for you is, I mean, we kind of talked about it before, like a politician that you would identify with. I mean, it sounded like you generally vote, I guess, third-party libertarian. When it comes to libertarians and like Libertarian Party, it seems like there's been some controversy with like the Mises Caucus kind of taking over, and it seems like the well,
Yeah,
it seems like honestly, I was just last thing I was going to say that it seems like, especially in 2024, the Libertarian Party has never been in like a worse state in terms of their electoral performance. I think even Jill Stein got more votes than the Libertarian candidate Chase Oliver, who
She got
I think Chase Oliver.
0.5%.
That's by design, though, because the people running the Libertarian Party supported Trump and basically threw their weight behind Trump. And then
That's right. Dave
left
Smith
the
gave a
actual-
speech at the thing.
But why couldn't Trump get the official endorsement then?
I don't. That probably gets into arcane stuff, but he wasn't selected by the delegates. He didn't get picked. So they had a candidate, Chase Oliver, who was running as the nominee, but then the people in control of the party, the Mises Caucus people, decided they supported Trump. So, I mean, I don't have all the details fresh of hand because I checked out of the LP a long time ago. I don't associate. I don't affiliate. So, yeah.
You don't
that's
normally
why,
vote
though.
third party? I thought you mentioned earlier that you don't tend to vote for Republicans, I guess.
Well, I vote. So I was speaking more at a presidential level. The last several presidential elections, I voted Libertarian. And what I tend to do is research the candidates down ballot and sometimes vote for the Republican, sometimes the Libertarian.
Never the Democrat.
I'm not that concerned with voting, to be honest with you, especially with the work that I do. Like, my vote is so minimal in terms of the impact I have with everything else I do. Just one vote. I obviously do my diligence and research who I'm going to vote for, but I don't care that much one way or the other.
But you
so you
care
don't
who
really
wins,
mind,
don't
like-
you?
Yeah, of course.
So when you
but
wake up on election day, are you disappointed or are you happy that Trump won?
Well, I feel like I was going to wake up and be kind of dismayed either way. I thought the Biden administration was terrible, like genuinely awful in so many ways, and I think Kamala would have been an extension of it. I think it would probably be a lot less chaotic. If it was Kamala. I've definitely let me say this.
Yeah.
If I could have had Trump in his first term, governing the way he governed in his first term, and with the people around him who were much more serious and much more competent, I probably would have voted for that over Kamala. If all the 2020 shit hadn't happened, if the fake electors, all that hadn't happened, if I could just have that first term Trump, I agreed with probably 70% of what he did. And the country was in a good place in 2019, in my view.
What is your highest priority as a voter? Is it the economy?
Well, I don't think about things as a voter. I think about things as a commentator. Like, what do I care most about? What I talk about? My YouTube channel gets like 2 million views a month. Like, I'm influencing people's views on things in a much bigger way than my one vote. I vote no on a lot of tax increases locally. Like, I don't know. But I don't think about voting that much, basically, is the answer to that. It's because it's so inconsequential, my one vote.
Well, Pisco has messaged us. He says, "I've got a hard out in 5 minutes," and so that's a good spot to end it. I think right there. Brad, you want to shout
What a
your
great
stuff out?
guest.
Tell people exactly.
Yeah,
What a great guest.
nice.
You guys, look. People say this is an echo chamber, which, to be fair, Brad agreed with us for the most part this entire episode. Okay,
Well,
but you know,
No, there was a spat there.
okay, but you know, still, he's not a MAGA guy, just to be clear. Okay,
When I
but
saw
you know,
the lineup of topics was going to be deportations and trade. I mean, I've always been pro immigration and pro free trade. I was like, we're going to agree on a lot. So, but that's okay. That's not the point. You know, I just like talking to people, and maybe there'll be opportunities to
Exactly.
talk in the future and maybe debate some stuff. So,
Well,
exactly.
we
Brad, if
enjoyed
wanna ever
you-
debate on
We
the
enjoyed
welfare
you
state, let me
and
know.
Pisco sparring with each other. That was a fun
was
exchange.
very
yeah,
fun.
again, and good luck, Pisco, with your content. It seems like if you've only been doing this for a couple months, you're doing very well as a
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, I've
Definitely is,
seen-
yeah.
I've seen you make a splash, and I've seen clips of you and stuff from you, and not just Tim Pool. And I'm like, okay, if you've only been doing this for a few months, you're heading in a good trajectory.
Appreciate it. And I
Listen,
couldn't have done it
keep
without
going.
my fellow Live and Learn co-hosts.
We were gassing
Especially,
him
I would
for-
say Josiah, wherever he is. I hope that he comes back to America. But honestly, thank you very much for that, and it's very nice of you.
We were
Fiscal-
gassing you up, man. We didn't really get into it too much, but I just can't stress enough. Like, I thought that showing on Tim Pool was really impressive for so many reasons. I just thought you did such a good job.
Thank you.
So, Brad, where can people find you on social media?
Check out the Brad versus Everyone podcast on podcast platforms or YouTube, or just search my name anywhere on socials.
Pisco,
All right, there you go.
what's your YouTube?
Pisco's Hour on YouTube.
Econoboy, you want to plug your shit?
E-boy, yes. Okay, so guys, I've been writing a lot about tax policy on my Substack. Okay, if you want to know all the good taxes that we can do to steal money from the rich, go to my Substack and be sure to subscribe. I also have an article coming out on Sunday about wealth redistribution, the responsible way, Brad, not with expropriation like socialists like to do. Okay, the responsible wealth redistribution that we can engage in, a la Norway. That's coming out on Sunday. I try to release articles every Sunday. That's econoboy.substack.com. And then my YouTube and everything else is just Econoboy as well, guys.
You guys can find me on YouTube at Hutch and Twitch at Hutch. And then on Twitter, I'm Hutchinson. And yeah, thank you guys for
Don't
tuning
follow
in. Brad,
Pondering Politics, whatever you do. Bad
Fuck that
channel.
Brad, thanks again for coming
That
on,
guy.
dude. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Stay